start our official meeting here. Okay. Ooh, and someone from Kingston just showed up. Want to make sure we knew that. Kingston Food Cup from New York. Well, the whole east side of the country is really showing out today. Okay, so we are starting the session. This is FCI Live. Thank you guys so much for coming out and being a part of our Fall 2021 series. We have a speaker today I am super excited about. This is probably one of the, there's lots of great sessions this time around. This is one of the ones I was particularly excited about. I don't know if you might have met or seen Nikki at Up and Coming 2021, and the session she ran there was really, people were really excited about it and wanted to see and hear more. So we have Nikki Jackson from Tenru Consulting here with us to talk about some easy ways that we now as startup food co-ops can start running more inclusive meetings. And with that, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Nikki.
Great, thank you, JQ. Greetings, good afternoon, curious cooperators. I am going to start off with an exercise right off the top, and I'm going to make this statement and say that access is equality and equality is power. So I want to invite you, I'm going to ask you if everyone has the materials that they need in the format that they need it in order to participate in today's session fully. So we'll just take a minute, and if you have an accommodation that is not currently being met, if you don't have the format that you need, you can privately send a message through the chat to JQ. And you might be asking yourself like, well, what does that mean? So we have enabled and tested, and live transcript is enabled on this Zoom call, which means if you need closed captioning, you should have the ability to turn that on and see that on the bottom of your screen if you need it. And I'll also say that I do want this to be a conversation, not a presentation. So I chose not to do a visual presentation today. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything like that for you to watch on the screen. So for this particular meeting, there isn't a PowerPoint, but I don't want to assume that I know what you guys might need for an accommodation. So just starting off by saying access is equality. And if you don't have what you need, please let us know. JQ, are we good to go? Did you get any requests?
We are good to go. I did not get any requests at this time.
Awesome, great. So then I'll start out by saying I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity, to have this space to talk about this topic with you guys. I understand that we are bombarded with tons of things that could be taking our attention and our bandwidth at any given time. So I want to say thank you. If you're here live, that's awesome. If you're watching this at a later date, that's great too. And yes, I am Nikki. My pronouns are she and her. I currently reside on land that belongs to the Kickapoo and Peoria tribes. I've lived here for about 13 years, and I'm currently sharing a space with my little four-legged creature. Her name is Boo Radley, so hopefully she will be quiet through this presentation. But if you hear me referring to Boo, I'm not, talking to myself. I'm calming her down a little bit. I would describe myself as a 30-something white, short woman. I have brownish hair that is styled in an extremely short pixie cut. And I am wearing a white ruffled tank and a iridescent green glass pendant necklace. And I'm sitting in front of a blue and purple starry backdrop. So you might be asking yourself, like, what was that? That is what in the disability world we would consider a visual description or an audio description for people who might not be able to visually see us in a meeting. It also serves very well. This came to my attention later. I would not have thought of this, but it serves very well as a way to describe the atmosphere to someone who might not have the best internet connection. Maybe they don't see their video, they're calling in on a phone instead of that, anything like that. So really, it's just a very simple practice that is more inclusive to all different groups of people. And it's a really good practice to start getting into. It might feel a little uncomfortable at first. When I first sat in my first meeting and that happened, I actually thought to myself, like, wow, what's going on? I don't understand. But I think there was a statistic I learned in high school that like 98% of communication is nonverbal. And so if you just think of all the things that you can harvest from visually being able to see the people that you're meeting with, you're at an advantage right there off of someone who can't see that. So that is why I recommend doing a description at the top of a meeting. I also start my conversations with this disclaimer that I am a proud disabled woman. I am blind. You might hear me interchange that with legally blind. In the blind community, it's the same thing. I do have some vision, so I don't want anyone to be confused if you see me reading notes. And when I speak on the subject of inclusivity and diversity and accessibility, I am coming at that from my expertise as my personal experience of a lived experience as a disabled person. I don't speak for all disabled people, and I don't even speak for all blind people. But as I have embraced my disabled identity, I have become more involved in the disability advocacy community. And so my hope for today really is to share with you best practices. And I would hate for you to leave here today feeling overwhelmed or feeling like you're doing everything wrong. So really, if you just take any of these tips or suggestions and start, practicing that inclusive muscle and putting them into your practices as a startup co-op, now is like a really great time to be starting this, right? Because you can get this as a habit and ingrain it in the culture of your co-op through your meetings. Our vision as a disabled advocacy community is to shift our mindsets from into having inclusivity into the universal design of things just automatically being more welcoming and inclusive to all different sorts of people, and shifting away from what it is right now, which is accommodate the problem or accommodate after the fact, or very specific cookie cutter things. So unfortunately, being inclusive isn't a checklist. It's not a one size fits all, but that's where you guys as cooperators have this beautiful model to be able to fit things to your community. What a co-op in Chicago needs to do isn't going to be the same as a co-op in a little town in Wisconsin. Or anything like that. So really, I'm here to plant ideas. And if you take any of these and incorporate them in your board meetings, in your staff meetings, in your owner meetings, getting more owner engagement and having that welcome of your community members and shoppers, or if you're a board member and you have a different job, maybe you'll take these ideas and incorporate them into your other meetings and the rest of your life too. And when we know better, we do better. So that's kind of where we're coming at with that. So this is going to be broken into 3 separate sections. I'm going to talk about pre-meeting things that you can do, which would be how you plan your meetings. And then the actual meeting, such as what we're doing right now today, we're actually in a meeting, in a session together. And then post-meeting, how to follow up and think about the accessibility questions and the inclusivity questions each step of that way. So Jacqueline, do we have any clarifying questions yet?
We don't yet. Nope, we're good.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. So pre-meeting is really going to be where you can really be efficient and kind of catch most of the I don't want to call them issues, but catch most of the things that you can do preemptively to make your meeting run more smoothly. So for I just kind of want to like throw out there, like if you think of how you plan a meeting right now, like not necessarily thinking how to make it accessible, but when you're planning a meeting, what are some of the steps and some of the things that you kind of go through to plan a meeting? If anyone wants to throw those steps in the chat, that would be cool. But what are things that we think of when we're planning a meeting? What are the questions you ask yourself and when you plan?
Okay, we're starting to get some comments. Who's going to be there is the first thing.
Great
Who
question.
should be, and who should be part of the meeting? Darlene actually broadens that and says who specifically should be there.
Right.
Others, I'm waiting for more to pop up. Okay.
Those are great questions because I did not even think of those questions. So that's great.
Kim has, what is the agenda going to be and how are we going to connect with the audience?
Great.
Sue asks, says location. Mary says, yes, who will participate, but also what are our objectives? What are we hoping to accomplish? And Katie says, what info do we need to include so people have context for participation?
Oh, those are all great questions. Great, good job. So I'll start with location because that is a really big thing that, you know, you have to think about where you're holding your meeting. I will speak to, as best as I can, I will speak to in-person meetings as well as virtual meetings. So very simple. We're all used to in-person meetings. So you think about the location. You might think like, oh, is it accessible? And that's a really good question to ask. Accessible means different things to different groups of people though as well. So if you're thinking about accessible, one of the questions I would ask is this accessible to public transportation? Do the bus runs there? And is there parking? Is the parking wheelchair accessible? All those sorts of questions. That falls into the location of things. And that's not just for the disabled community, that's for a whole, that's really, especially if you're in an urban environment, like that's just a really good question to ask. And just because I'm thinking of it on that topic of public transportation is what time are you holding your meetings? If you're having it like later at night, the buses might go there, but then when do the buses stop running? Will people be able to get home? That's happened to me. So that's why I asked that question. And I think that's something that like the majority of the population just wouldn't think of that. So location in that sense is a thing. When I say accessibility for disabled people, I'm just going to use a broad stroke with that and include like hearing impairment, visual impairment, and mobility impairment, but that's not to say that there aren't other sorts of disabilities. In terms of like physical accommodations to that though, like is your wheelchair accessible parking near a wheelchair accessible entrance to the building? If the parking is in the back and there's a ramp in the front, is there a way to get from that parking spot to the ramp? Is there a sidewalk going up there? That might be a given, like you think that's a given, and sadly it's not. Within the building, is the room that you're using on the first floor? If it's not on the first floor, is there a working elevator to the second floor or to whatever floor it is? And aside from stairs and that, you also need to make sure that there are accessible bathrooms, meaning that people with mobility issues can get into and out of and maneuver within the bathroom independently. That is also not a given. So there's a lot of details like that. I can give you guys, I have a resource sheet and I actually found a great place that gives like checklists like that for like architectural and physical accommodations for a in-person meeting sort of thing. But from start to finish, just kind of like go through the whole process in your head of going through that physical meeting. Is the room itself set up in a way where people can communicate with each other properly? So I was on a board of directors and our board room was awesome because we sat at a board table, like a conference room table. We were facing each other. So if there was anyone on the board who had a hearing impairment, or you could see each other well, they could lip read if they needed to. But if there was an owner in the room, we had our backs to the owners. So that would be one thing that you would need to think about. How can we make this accessible to those owners when they need it? So that is for in-person location decision-making. Now let's kind of touch on virtual. Questions that I ask if an application is accessible for virtual meetings. So we'll just use Zoom as an example because it's what we're using now and it's what most people are most familiar with. Is there closed captioning available? And is it screen reader friendly? So a screen reader is what I use as a blind person. It will quite literally, it reads my screen to me. As I touch a button, it'll tell me what the button says before I click on it. And not all websites or applications are compatible with that. So that's something to check into before you decide and purchase or connect with a particular platform. Zoom is screen reader friendly. It also has closed captioning. And within closed captioning, there are different functions. Zoom has what they call closed captioning, which means you can enable another participant in the meeting to sit there and type out the closed captions, which that would be a really interesting job for someone to have. I personally wouldn't want that job, but there are people out there who can do that very well. They've also just released this feature called Live Transcript, which is what we're using today. And that is an auto-generated closed captioning, and that can be saved and released to people at a later date. That again is good for all sorts of people. Not all people want to listen to a whole meeting or sit through a meeting. Minutes have their place, but you don't write everything down word for word when you have meeting minutes. But with a transcript, someone can skim through, find what they need. Some people are visual learners, not audible learners. So again, that's like kind of includes a lot more different people when you give the transcript for something after a meeting. Just my thoughts on any auto-generated closed captioning or live transcript is that you really want to proofread it before you publish it at the end, because there can be some really entertaining mistakes in there. And you do want to make sure you give that a read through and make sure that everything is accurate in that. So those are the questions you want to ask for a virtual meeting in that sense. And so that is with location. That also kind of touches on like who's going to be in your meeting. If you have a board meeting that's open to owners, you need to make sure that your board members are clearly being accommodated the way that they would need to be by getting materials ahead of time. But owners don't always necessarily get the same materials that board members do. So an owner isn't going to get, you know, like the financial information, all those sorts of things. So that is, that'll be specific to any, what the different kinds of meetings that you're having. So then after you picked a location, then the next step would be to invite people, get the word out and invite them. So this is another place that you want to make sure that your invitations are accessible. First and foremost, I say, like, I just think it's a good idea to not just have your invitations in one place or one format. Don't just advertise it on your Facebook page and don't just do it in an email, but you know, that's a marketing thing. Do it in several different formats and several different places. That's more inclusive and will reach a bigger audience. But make sure that if you're doing an email or you're doing it on Facebook or however you're doing it, that again, it's accessible, that it is screen reader friendly. And this is where we get to the point again about if there's an image in your email, if you've made like a flyer and it's a JPEG or a PNG or whatever it is that we're calling images these days in technology, I'm not sure all of the different names for them. But if there's text on that image, you need to make sure that text is portrayed in another way within your email. The first way I would say to do that is alt text. What alt text is it's like a description that's written. You don't see it visually in the email. It's embedded behind the image so that when someone's screen reader comes across it, it will read what that text says. And what it should say is what's described as the picture. So if it's like, President Steve is in front of the co-op holding a sign inviting you to our next board meeting, which is on Tuesday at 6 p.m. at this location. So whatever it says as text in that image needs to be in the alt text. If you're having technical difficulty doing alt text, or you don't know how to do it, or it's not working properly, another way, number 2, would be to do an image description, which is quite literally just a caption under the photo that says image description and then describes what's in the image. Now, if everything that is on that image is somewhere within the text of the email, then you don't need to do that. I, as a disabled person, would still highly recommend that you still do that. I'm a huge fan of image descriptions because if, say you get an email and it has an image description in it, that's just bringing awareness to the person receiving that email, like, oh, what's this image description? Why is that there? And maybe they will adapt that practice once they realize why it's there. Well, this is there for a very specific reason. It's helping people out.
Nikki, quick, we got a couple questions here. Can I,
Sure.
I'm usually gonna happen around alt text. So is alt text something you can set up inside of things like MailChimp, Constant Contact? Which of these are friendly to this kind of adaptation?
Yeah. Alt text is something that is an option on Constant Contact and on MailChimp. I personally have experienced a lot of problems with Constant Contact specifically. I have not experienced problems with MailChimp. That doesn't mean there aren't problems. It just means I can't speak to them. What a lot of platforms do is they give a limit to how many characters you can put in your alt text. So if you have a lot of stuff that you need to put into it, you might not always be able to get it in to the alt text within Constant Contact. I also, I've not used Constant Contact like myself personally, but when I have issues as a receiver of them, a lot of people give me feedback where they say, well, I added the alt text in the library and then it didn't show up in the email. So it's one of those things where like you change it in the library, and then I think you also have to include it within the email. Like you have to know how you're formatting your email and do all that sort of thing within the newsletter itself. And so making sure doing that training, it's kind of a step to take. So
there was also someone direct messaged me a question. So what's your, if you were to state a preference, alt text or put that image description on in that newsletter?
Right now, I would say for my personal preference, I would say image description. One, because I think it's way easier to do than to figure out how to do alt text properly. And 2, because it is giving a visual cue to able-bodied people that it's there.
Okay.
And it's an awareness thing, in my opinion. So that's what I would say for my personal, this is one blind girl's opinion for alt text and image description.
Okay, that was our questions.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the email invitation, or like the invitation itself. You want to make sure that your invites, however you're doing it, in person, in the store, in mail, email, all those things, that you have a slew. You're covering all your bases and doing that. Within that invitation also, it's so simple to do this. And my heart just feels so happy when I get an invitation in my email, even if I don't want to go to the thing. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to go to this because these people are awesome. When you put a line in there that says, if you need any accommodations to participate in the session, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at, and then insert an email or a phone number. That's just like making us feel like you want us in that space. And it's such a simple thing to do. But on top of that, you, for your own sake, should also put a deadline in there. If this is like a big meeting, like an owner meeting or an annual meeting or anything like that, and you have it planned out, far in advance, hopefully, you're going to, not all accommodations can be done like that or can be done on the spot. Some of them will take money. Some of them will take planning. You might have to learn how to do it. And so you want to give yourself, I say at least 3 days. All the resources that I'll be referring you to, I think also say 3 days, where there's a 3-day deadline that people should get their accommodation requests into you by. So that's within the email itself. So another aspect of that, especially if you're doing an email invitation, a lot of places require you to register for a meeting or sign up. And that's another aspect, that's a different website, another entity that you're going to. Is that accessible? Which I know that's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of different steps, but 98% of websites are not ADA compliant. They say they are, but they're not actually user friendly. So doing the research and finding out which platforms to use that are accessible is a really big thing. So again, is it screen reader friendly? If there's a text field to fill in, that needs to be screen reader friendly. It also needs to be like voice to text friendly. So if someone has a mobility issue and they might not be able to type, they might dictate to their device to fill something in. So that's another thing to make sure that that step of the process for registering is accessible. And with that, my really big recommendation, if at all possible, is to put something on the person's registration where they can fill in and request accommodation requests. This happens a lot with like conferences and bigger things like that, or workshops, but that's just a really great habit. And that would then be a second catch of asking for accommodations. You invited people to ask for an accommodation in the invite, in the email, and then within the registration, you've asked again. So that's just another step of pre-planning and including people in that. So then the only other thing I can think of to speak on in a pre-meeting thing would then be to get people those accommodations or plan those accommodations. And I can't really speak to like all the little details and specific things to that, because you never know what people are going to ask for, but people will know themselves best. And when someone asks for an accommodation, like the law is written that people can ask for any reasonable accommodation. And I would just say that it's very unlikely that you'll get an unreasonable accommodation from someone. Now is a good time to start sending questions into the chat because I'm about to wind down with the pre-meeting questions. But you might need to find and hire an interpreter, whether that be an ASL interpreter or a Spanish interpreter or anything like that. Only 2% of hearing impaired people actually use ASL though. So closed captioning might be their preference. And so it's really going to be, you have to field those as they come in. And again, I'll give you a resource library that talks on all those topics of how to actually find accommodations for things, how to like go about doing those steps. But are there any questions specifically for pre-meeting stuff that I've spoken on?
All right, let's see. We don't have any additional questions that have popped up yet. Unless if you guys have been throwing in questions and I'm not seeing them wave at me, we are having a little tiny bit of tech difficulty right now. Yeah, Linda.
Question, sorry. Do you know, Nikki, if Eventbrite is accessible?
I need to think. Eventbrite. Okay, I'm thinking. I do think I have been to a few sessions with Eventbrite. The only thing I can think of that sticks out to me that is not awesome about Eventbrite is that when you have to register, you get timed out. And that I was trying to register for something through Eventbrite and I got timed out like 15 times. It was really frustrating. And it was one of those things where I think they gave you like 10 or maybe 15 minutes to do it. But there were so many fields for me to fill in that I couldn't do it in that amount of time with my voiceover. And so I ended up having to get my husband to do it for me because I just got so frustrated. So that's the only personal experience that I can remember that I can speak to about Eventbrite.
Thanks.
Yes. Okay, so then with that then, I will say that it is really important. This is the easy thing, and this is the good thing about the world of technology the way it is now. It wasn't like this when like I was in college. It was way more convoluted and complicated than that. So at least we have that going for us, that we have this like built-in stuff right now. Is if you can have your information in electronic formats, if that's PDF or through Google Docs or a Word doc, that's just so much more accessible for a lot of people. And that enables disabled people to accommodate themselves how they need to. If they need to print that out in large print, if they have a voice reader for that, if they want to print that in Braille, they can. If they need to get that, that's enabling people to do things for themselves, and it's much less work for you. So having your agenda, having your meeting minutes, having those things as an electronic format and sharing those with people before the meeting is that's just gold standard, really good for all involved. But also, if you think about it, I am trying to break people of the habit of thinking that, oh, I can get you that PowerPoint after the meeting. No, like that's so not cool. That's really bad, because then if I'm taking the time and I'm sitting in on that meeting, if I don't personally have that ahead of time, I can't see the images, I can't look at the charts, I can't see all of that stuff. And most people who are good presenters aren't sitting there reading their PowerPoint word for word and describing every point on the chart and giving you every number on the chart and telling you all the trends that are going on with your finances. So if I'm at a meeting, I can't participate, I can't ask questions of the presenter in person the way everybody else can if I don't have that stuff ahead of time. So if someone asks for those things, and I know this is really hard, I used to be the organizer of board meetings. I used to be the vice president, so it was my job to send out those agenda packets. And I know that it's hard to get people's reports submitted and having all that stuff in a timely manner before the meeting. But accessibility is a really big reason why you want those things ahead of time and send those out if people ask for them. So that's the pre-meeting stuff I have. Jacqueline, JQ, I'm gonna take a sip real quick if you had any other questions roll in.
Sure. So we had I think one came direct. So I'm hoping that the chat's still working, because actually for the first time ever, I don't know why, my whole control panel has disappeared and I actually cannot type in the chat. It is frozen. So I have a funny feeling and I can't reboot. So the way we're gonna do this from here on out, I'm not sure I'm seeing chat comments.
Okay.
So, and I can't even see you guys visually, unfortunately. It has truly frozen. So we're going to have to take these pauses and ask people to unmute and ask their questions if possible, because they're not coming through.
That's fine with me.
So do anyone have?
JQ, I can see them if you want me to help out.
That would be terrific, because I literally cannot. Everything is frozen.
Okay. Katie is asking, can you talk about accessibility for printed materials? What are the considerations like text size, colors, etc.?
Right. That's a great question. There is actually like a guideline for printed things on web pages. It's web guideline accessibility content, and they talk about like font size and contrast, like coloring is a big thing. Using like different color fonts can be problematic if someone is colorblind and that sort of thing. For me personally, I say if you have something as a actual paper thing, like a print thing, having it as an electronic format is a really good catch. It's a very good thing. Offer it to them in an electronic format if someone needs that. Because like I said, then they can accommodate it themselves. But I would say just a rule of thumb for print material, if you have posters or something, is just, the bigger and the clearer the font, the better, and the less like non-contrasted font. So I wouldn't use lime green on white. I would use lime green on black, or that sort of thing. I wouldn't go smaller. I'd say then maybe 20 font for like paper flyers for like most things. But that's a personal thing for me. I can't see smaller than 20 fonts. So maybe 18 or 16 would be okay, but I can't really speak to that specifically. So
Well, that accessibility rule also was a great design rule, which is keep the text so minimal that you can put it that large on your flyer.
right.
So
Great
it's
point.
a win-win. I just wanted
Great point.
to let you know, because you mentioned we're at 20 minutes left in the session.
Okay, great. Thank
Linda?
you.
No
Were there-
more questions have come in.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so then we're in the meeting. Here we are. So we've already done 2 practices that I would say should be done in the meeting, and that is to start your meeting off by saying access is equality. Does everybody have the materials that they need? I experienced that in an in-person workshop in classroom, and the way they handled that was that they asked everyone to raise their hand when they were ready to start. And that's how the presenter knew when everyone's hand was raised, then the presenter would continue on that way. And then the other thing that we've already done is giving a visual description of the person speaking or the person facilitating the meeting. I've actually gone to like a co-op board meeting before, and the board didn't introduce themselves in any way. And so I was watching and I'm like, I don't know who anybody is, but I also don't know who anybody's job is. So I was new to that particular co-op. I didn't know who was the president, who was the secretary, who was like any of those things. So in my brain, I'm thinking I need to reach out to the secretary to ask them to give me the minutes afterwards, but I don't know who the secretary is. So I just think that it might take a few seconds, but maybe go around your board and you just very quickly say who you are, what your job is, if you have a job within the board, like a position within the board. And then specifically, like if you do have PowerPoint presentations, I would say a really good rule of thumb there would be as descriptive as you can be as you're speaking. Shy away from using words like here and there and over there, and be more descriptive and say on the top right, you'll see this, or on the bottom left, there'll be this. And describe the trends of charts. You don't have to do like each particular point. So here's an example. I was listening to a presentation and they were like, look at this map. This shows all these atrocities on this map. And I'm thinking like, I don't know what this map is. I don't know what the title of the map is, like where it is, what it's showing. And so it would have been really simple for that presenter to say, this is a map showing these neighborhoods in Chicago. And it shows that neighborhoods with a higher income have more full service grocery stores in it, but the neighborhoods that have a lower income don't have any full service grocery stores in it at all. And so that would be a way to describe like images within your PowerPoints. And then another thing to go along with that is that happens a lot with, I don't see this as much like in board meetings, of course, but if you're in a session and they want everyone to read a quote that's on the screen, we're gonna all take a minute and silently read this quote. If you as a presenter or the facilitator of that meeting don't want to read the quote, that's fine. Ask someone else in the room, would someone mind reading this quote out loud for the room? Because you're assuming everyone in the room can see it. You're assuming everyone in the room can read. And there's just a lot of, that's just one thing that I personally have to advocate for a lot when I'm in sessions, asking people to read things that are on the screen when we're told not, when it's not done by the presenter. And if you're breaking into groups or if you have team projects or committees, same thing. Don't just put the instructions on the board, read them out verbally and make sure that everyone has all of those instructions as well. So within the meeting, those are like my pointers of making the meeting itself accessible. If anyone has any questions on any of those points.
Linda, do we have any questions?
Sorry, no more have come in.
Awesome. So that's great. We just have the post meeting section now. And then I would love to listen to any, if people want to unmute and ask questions, that would be great. Post meeting, then we come back around again to, if you release your meeting minutes or any materials or follow-up emails. If you have a follow-up email that has a follow-up survey, like how did we do? Is that survey screen reader friendly and accessible? And just making sure that, you know, what you're putting out there, you know, I completely just lost my train of thought besides the surveys and the meeting minutes.
And making
But
sure
yeah.
that that survey is actually in a format that is readable.
Right, exactly. So that's just another thing, like people mentioned like Constant Contact and MailChimp, like making sure that the platforms that you're using to do your surveys are also accessible. So
This question just came in. How do we know if it's screen reader friendly? Is that a Google search?
no, unfortunately, it's not. You can hire people to do audits for you. You can, there's actually quite a few YouTubers. That would be my first suggestion, would be to Google or YouTube and ask those questions like, is this specific platform accessible? Or sometimes those platforms will put out training videos on how to use their accessible tools. So you can search that way, but you can also find people to do accessibility audits for you. And I would recommend that, and like have someone audit like your entire meeting process if you're doing it that way, from your email to your last email and through your whole experience for your event or your meeting. There also are ways for you to, there are YouTube videos that will teach you how to turn on your screen reader on your device, and you can test it yourself. I want to say it's simple, but I don't think it's fair to say that because I've been using it for a really long time. But I will be giving you a resource library. And in that library, it speaks on, there are some documents that are created by disabled people that speak to specific platforms. So when I was going through that, I did see someone make a document on how to use the accessibility features of Google Meet, or how to use the accessibility features on Zoom, or how to make a document itself more inclusively and accessible. So I will be sharing those with you, all those resources with you. One caveat that I have with that is that when you are looking for resources and doing your research on this stuff, I highly recommend that you are looking at who's giving you that information. We have a saying in the disability advocacy community that there should be no decision about us without us. So make sure you're going to organizations that are led by people with disabilities. So I'll be giving you resources. I'm referring you to the Deaf Network, which is led by deaf leaders. And I'm also going to be giving you the link to Disability Lead, which is an organization in the Chicago area that is just a collaboration of leaders with different disabilities. And all of the things that they compile and resources that they give are coming from people with lived experience of disabilities. So any other questions, you guys are welcome to unmute and ask at this point.
As people warm up to that, I have to ask, because so many people use it so deeply and so much. What about Google Docs and Google folders and Google tools? Are those pretty screen reader accessible? Are they pretty, or are they a problem?
I personally really don't like Google Docs.
Okay.
I don't even know very many able-bodied people who like Google Docs. My husband complains about it all the time. Technically they're screen reader friendly, but you know, when you're going within the document and like making changes, like collaborating and like making changes, what I personally do, like the workaround that I use, is I copy and paste it into a different app that I enjoy using, make the changes, and then copy and paste it back into the Google Docs. But then if you're like working collaboratively with the rest of your board members and they're making, that's happened where it's like, oh, you guys already made these changes, but Nikki made these changes separately and then added it back in. So But that might be that I'm not trained to use Google Docs properly yet. So I avoid it, but I know it has its place. So I don't know. That's my honest answer on that.
I appreciate it. Others with questions?
If there's a link, a hot link on your email, does that come across how to do that? Where to click and that kind of thing when you're doing
Yes.
that? Okay.
If there's a link to a website in my email, it will read it and it will acknowledge to me, my screen reader will acknowledge to me link actions available. And I have the option to take an action, which would be to click on that link. Now, whether or not that link is accessible, if that website is accessible, you have a 2% chance that it is. But yes, links are accessible within an email.
Excellent.
Do you ever use the app? I think it's called Splashpad.
I have not heard of or used it.
I'm a retired special education teacher, and I did have one student for 4 years that was blind, and that was one thing that he would use. And so it would read right off the teacher's computer instead of on the big screen, because bigger
Right.
didn't mean better for him. His
Right.
font was between 18 to 24.
Right.
Anything bigger than that was just too
Bad.
much for him.
Right.
I'd like to ask you, and you mentioned it, Nikki, but I think I've heard you speak on this, and I would just encourage you to say a little more about how addressing disability and accessibility in these ways throughout these meetings, throughout the way we think, throughout the way we plan, creates, a co-op ethos, but also just it creates more accessibility for everyone, whether there's disability issues or not, how it sets the culture. Could you speak to that a little more?
Sure. That reminded me of something too, that I may have said this, but accessibility should really be a line on your budget. It needs to be something that's worked in from the beginning and not oh my gosh, now we need to figure out how we're going to pay for this sort of thing. So put it in your budget, and that will make it part of your culture. But yeah, so alt text is an example of that. It was designed and created for screen reader users, but then some really smart marketing person out there decided that it's a great way for search engine optimization, SEO. So now marketers use it as a tool. It'll bump you up on Google searches if the images that you have on your website, the images that you have on your Facebook pages, Instagram, all those things, if there's alt text behind it, you get bumped. So that's a good reason to use alt text over an image description. But that is a high waters raise all boats. Another really prime example of that is curb cuts and sidewalks. Yeah, that's great for wheelchair users, but it's also good for people who are pushing strollers or delivery men who have hand trolleys and people who ride bicycles. So when we're thinking of this more of a universal design, it's just much better for everybody.
Well, when you pointed out too, you said something about you were talking closed captioning, and I was saying, I'm actually an advocate in the ADHD and autistic community, and it's actually an accessibility issue for that as well. But also,
Yes.
You often find people who are I didn't even know I needed X. I didn't even know this would make it more accessible. And I loved how you also pointed out, read the screen out loud, read the text out there, because someone in the audience might not read. And let's not make that assumption either. I just love seeing how that crosses so many lines.
Exactly. I was looking for a resource to teach people how to put closed captioning on things. And my resource I search on YouTube is a really simple YouTube video that people can watch and learn how to do this very quickly. And I got quite a few videos that popped up that instead of calling it closed captioning, they called it subtitles. And so people who are in the marketing field were saying that when you're watching a video or a clip on social media, if people are scrolling through, 80% of those people have their stuff muted or their sound turned off. I don't know, maybe they're scrolling through their phone at work and they don't want to get in trouble if a video pops up. But so if you do not have closed captioning on your video and someone is scrolling through, they're not going to stop and watch and read the closed captioning. You just lost 80% of your audience. You only have 20% of people left. So as a marketing thing, closed captioning is a really good thing. Another thing that I didn't speak to because it's kind of niche, but you can do audio descriptions for things as well. If you're making a commercial or a video, or you're showing a video in a meeting, you can do audio descriptions, which will, if your video is like all words, like on the screen, there should be someone who's reading it and saying what it is. That happens a lot with like shorter videos and advertisements and stuff. So audio description is another thing, but that's not specific to meetings in general. So I left it out of this outline.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, Katie, do you want to ask your question that you typed in?
Oh,
Sure, I've got to go back. Sure. I was wondering if you could share an example of an organization that does a really great job of this, and maybe where we might find, if they have like a video meeting on YouTube, for example, that we could check out.
right. That's a great question. I will include some examples of that in the resource document that I'll share with you guys. Personally, I attended the Chicago Food Justice Summit this year, and that was a virtual conference. I think they did it in April, and it was beautiful. They had ASL interpreters in every room. They had Spanish interpreters in every room, every step of the way. They used Whova as their platform app, WHOVA. That app I didn't have any issues with through the entire conference registration and all of that stuff. So I would say look up and watch sessions by the Chicago Food Justice Summit from 2021. And another great place that does meetings and stuff on a monthly basis and does webinars on these topics is Disability Lead out of Chicago. They used to be called ADA 25, and they just rebranded themselves this year as Disability Lead. They do different webinars every month. Everybody is welcome to join. They're very inclusive. Earlier this summer, they had Tammy Duckworth as a speaker. She's a disabled senator from Illinois. So they have really, really great connections with disabled leaders all throughout. So another thing that I want to point out, that this happens a lot, and it's just one of those disability etiquette things, is when I asked people to say if they needed an accommodation, I was really careful to make sure to say that you can send JQ a private message to do it. And that's to say that I am a proud disabled person. Not everyone is in that place in their journey. So please don't ever ask some people do it really innocently and they don't realize they're doing it, but don't ever ask someone to out themselves in a public meeting as disabled. There are really legitimate reasons why some people don't share that they're disabled. There are specific, there's stigmas, there's just all sorts of things. And so I have had a lot of experience with that, specifically in college, where, you go to your first day of class and the professor says, I have the PowerPoints in large print, who's the blind student? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be me. Thanks. You just outed me in front of 300 people that I don't know yet. So that's just a little personal tidbit in there to not ever ask, does anyone need an accommodation, and ask that in front of the group. And when we did that today, that was also our a third catch. We asked for accommodations ahead of time, accommodations requests ahead of time. So this was really a catch. And you want to start calmly and start your meeting with that question. And here's the kicker. Don't start until everything is in place. If the closed captioning isn't working, or there's technical difficulty, or your interpreter is having technical difficulty or hasn't turned up, you shouldn't start yet. And if that means that you can't get it figured out and you can't start your meeting, you have to consider postponing the meeting and canceling it, because you're not starting with everyone on a fair level at that point. So
We have just a
dry
minute here
runs
to
are a
wrap
good
up.
thing.
We have just a minute here to wrap up. Were there any final thoughts you wanted to share?
That's all I had. If anyone else had any questions, I think I reached all my talking points.
Any last question? All right. I can't share the slides, but I want to take a moment to first off really thank Nikki Jackson, 10RU, our consulting, for being here today and for this session. If you want to reach out to her, she's going to be sending out this packet. She's going to get that to me and I will send it to everyone who registered. And I assume your contact information will be in that. So
Yes.
people can find you. Okay.
Very simple. I'm nikki@tenru.com and it's TENRHU, short for tenacious rhubarb. So nikki@tenru.com is my contact.
Got it. Okay. Terrific. And then just to wrap ourselves up, make sure you guys know what's coming next. We only have 4 sessions left this fall. We have Tuesday, This Could Be Ours, the book by John Steinman, who's also the author of Grocery Story. He's going to be telling you not only about the book, but actually he has a bunch of tools and ideas and activities people can do to utilize the book to engage their owners in the conversation about their future store. So that's the only night session we're offering this time. Last time there was a lot more push for night sessions. That one will be at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, the 21st. Then Wednesday, Emerging Funding Trends at noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern with the Colluminate team. This is going to be all about like up to the minute cutting edge stuff they're seeing about how startup food co-ops are getting funded, because it's starting to shift real fast. We talked about that a little up and coming, but they're going to be using some live examples. And then on Thursday, we have 2. Thursday at our usual noon Central slot, we will have 7 Roots back to do one on called the Deli Weather Report. What is going on with prepared foods that you need to know about in your store design, how it's going to affect, who your future store is and its sales, because some stuff is really shifting there. And Kevin is one of the best experts in the country about that. And then that afternoon at 2 p.m. Central, we will actually have the folks from Shared Capital Cooperative here to talk about how to get your co-op loan ready. What actually should be in place to be ready to actually get the loan, what you need to know to work that relationship with your potential lenders. So that's what's coming up for the rest of the series. I hope you guys will join us for a lot of it. If you're looking for the registration page, I email those out every Friday, so you'll get that tomorrow. But also you can go to the events page on Food Co-op Initiative's Facebook page, go to events, and all the events are there. You can click on them and there's a link to the registration page. And then last but not least, I just want to take a moment to thank the USDA, National Cooperative Bank, National Co-op Grocers, and CoBank, who all funded these sessions, and FCI Live in general today. We couldn't do it without them. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming out and sharing time with us. Lots of great useful tips. Thank you. Lots of thank yous.
Great.
Right. Have a great one, guys.